Let's go through this short article. Does Netflix have a currency problem? This was from the summer of 2018. The recent rise in the US dollar contributed to Netflix's second quarter woes. So let's talk about why a strong US dollar is bad for Netflix, right? Why would that be bad for Netflix? First, let's look and see if this has continued to be the case. This is a chart of the cost of the euro versus the US dollar. So what you're saying is, what do you have to give up in US money to buy 1 euro? Now, as you can see, the price of the euro has continued to go lower. So you can say it two ways. You can say the euro has weakened versus the US dollar, or the US dollar has strengthened. They both mean the same thing because they're always relative to each other. So the first sentence is a little confusing. It says Netflix told their investors that changes in currency had actually added $65 million to revenue. But they did note that the positive impact was smaller than what they had anticipated several months earlier when the dollar was weaker against other currencies. So they must have said something like, hey, we think we're going to get $100 million, but it turned out the boost was only $65 million. So even though it's a positive number, they're saying, we know this is less than what you had expected. Next paragraph says the US dollar index went up 5.9% in the second quarter. Next sentence is important. Netflix does not hedge currency risk. But it did tell shareholders in the letter that it is planning to move more of its operating cost to non-dollar denominated locales, quote, to provide a little more what they called natural hedging. Skipping to the second page. In the latest quarter, Netflix's international revenue surpassed domestic revenue for the first time ever. The company generated $1.92 billion from non-US operations. Next paragraph. Netflix wrote to shareholders that, quote, we slowly adjust pricing over time to mitigate foreign exchange moves, but when currency moves are rapid, they will affect our near-term operating margin. And that's because they can't change what they're charging the customers very quickly to take into account rapid movements in exchange rates. The last thing it says is we will tend to outperform on dollar weakness. So they're saying when the dollar gets weak against the euro, we will do better. And the opposite, when the dollar is strong, that actually makes Netflix do worse. So let's try to figure out why that's the case. Let's do some what's called back-of-the-envelope calculations. If you've never heard that idiom, it just means you're going to do rough estimates. You don't need exact numbers to get your point across. So let's try to figure out what happens to Netflix when exchange rates between the US dollar and the euro change by a penny. Well, we need some rough estimates. For example, we need to know how many Netflix subscribers do they actually have in Europe. And for that, we can go over to Google search by 2024, but we don't want that. We want, there you go, second sentence. In 2018, this figure stood at just below 40 million. So we'll use 40 million. So 40 million subscribers in Europe. I don't know what their monthly fee would be, but let's make the math easy for ourselves and say it's 10 euros per month. So that would work out to be roughly 400 million euros every month from Europe to Netflix. Now, Netflix being a US company, they don't really have a need for euros. They need to convert those into US dollars. So let's say that the exchange rate was $1.15. So every euro can be brought back to the United States and turned into $1.15 US money. So it looks to me that would work out to be $460 million every month. That's pretty good. That tells you how Netflix can afford to throw so much money at so many movies and making their own movies and Adam Sandler movies and pay outrageous amounts. Well, they're bringing in $460 million in cash every month from Europe. So let's see what happens if the US dollar gets stronger, which means the euro gets weaker. So the euro would fall. So let's say it falls from $1.15 to $1.11. And for simplicity, we assume that didn't change anything about how many subscribers there are, or that in Europe they pay 10 euros per month. The only thing that's going to change is that exchange rate. So if I switch the exchange rate to be $1.11, now Netflix will bring in $444 million. So that's a difference of $16 million per month. So if you think about that, that's a lot of money. $16 million per month times 12 months, $192 million less that Netflix would get just because the exchange rate moved from $1.15 to $1.11. And back to our chart, you can see it has continued to go down, and now it's down to $1.07, $1.08. It did have a little spike a month ago, but now it's down to $1.07, $1.08. So Netflix does not do any hedging. They just decided to let things happen. Now, of course, things could move in their favor. The US dollar could weaken and the euro could get stronger. So what would happen in that case? So let's change the exchange rate, make it go up to $1.20. So if the exchange rate were to go up to $1.20, let's assume they're still getting 400 million euros. What do those convert into US money? My back of the envelope calculation says that that would be $480 million per month. That's an extra $20 million over an exchange rate I started with of $1.15. An extra $20 million a month happens 12 times in a year. Netflix would bring in an extra $240 million. Pure profit, right? Because the cost of buying the movies is already set. So every time they get an extra dollar, that's an extra dollar of pre-tax profit. Let's go back to one thing Netflix said in the article in the first page. Netflix does not hedge, but they told the shareholders, we're going to try to move more of our operating cost over to, what they're really saying is over to Europe. Instead of spending everything in US dollars, what if we can somehow start spending euros? So they're probably over there trying to buy movies and TV shows that were made in Europe where they don't need to convert euros into US dollars. When they collect euros, they can turn around and spend them in Europe to buy European television and movie shows. So that's what they're talking about here. That's what they meant by natural hedging. If they go ahead and lock themselves into some purchases in Europe, then they won't care as much what happens to the euro. But they can only do so much hedging. Being a US company, at some point they need to bring back at least some part of that money to the US as a return to their shareholders. All right, I hope this helped you make sense out of this article. If you have any questions about it, send me an email.